Want to give a quick shout out to 2 individuals here who bought what we call the host committee package. So if you have at least 3 friends, you can buy a host committee package and bring said 3 people or more. John Zripko and Sloan Barber. Round of applause for both of you. And then 2 VIPs who have a bit of a low profile. They don't want to necessarily come up here on stage, but one day I'll try to get them here on stage. And I just want to give them a quick shout out. So Jason Starr was in the governor's office. He helped write the CRTA. He's been an advocate for many years and then transitioned into the administration. And we are excited to welcome him here tonight. And then Shatad Floyd from the mayor's office. And congrats on closing Rikers. So thank you to both of you for all that you do for New York City and New York State and for spending time with us. This obviously couldn't be done by just me, for anyone who knows me. This couldn't be done by just me. Big shout out to the whole team. There should definitely be a space between NY and team. My OCD is kicking in. This is not endorsed by the New York Times. So CannaGather New York team, you see him. You've probably seen him around tonight. You've seen him for the past couple months, couple years. So round of applause to everyone on the team. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Quick shout out to our sponsors. Let's get Cole Shots up here. Liz Bogle from Cole Shots, longtime partner for us here.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Liz Bogle, and I'm an attorney at Cole Shots. And we've been in the space since about 2013, and we have a team of attorneys. We range from doing tax work in the cannabis space to real estate to licensing. I specifically look at industrial hemp and environmental implications of cultivation, and that's what I do. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you are an investor, or if you just want to know some information about what we do, please come see us. We have a table outside, and we'd love to get to know you.
We have Snap Slide. Jason is right there. Come on up. Yeah, we'll switch to your brief presentation and tell us a little bit about Snap Slide, a very innovative packaging solution.
Thank you.
Did you want to drive, or you want me to do it?
Would you drive? Sure. Hey everybody. My name is Jason. My company is Snap Slide, and we make a brand new patented mechanism which allows child resistance and one-hand operation. What we're here for is future-proofing in cannabis packaging. After 3 years of work pursuing a pharmaceutical deal, we were engaged with the largest producer of pill vials in the country. And now we can turn to cannabis packaging. We thought for these last 3 years we were ignoring cannabis packaging, but it turns out we were designing very good cannabis packaging because we'd been designing to pharmaceutical standards. And to be completely frank and hopefully offensive to no one who makes packaging in CR, in cannabis, there are some packages that, while being called CR, we don't believe are up to pharmaceutical standards for child resistance. Future-proof, we have patented differentiation. This mechanism is patented, and we believe that's pertinent in an increasingly regulated environment. We have endless flexibility: tin, glass, all kinds of plastic, hemp, bioplastic, any kind of plastic that is viable in the marketplace, we can make these out of. Pre-rolls, flowers, edibles, big tubs for pulling the flower off the plant. We're California 2020 compliant, resealable, tamper evident, and back to child resistance that I mentioned. So would you go ahead? So child resistance you have to think of as the Goldilocks zone between child resistance and senior friendly, and we are right there. We have done testing through an agency called Bird Dog that is one of the premier CR testing firms in the country, and we passed with flying colors so that we can tailor our mechanism to give a nice ergonomic feel and be really child resistant, pharma child resistant. So again, pharmaceutical standards. We have true child resistance. We have product integrity because we're able to create a product environment inside the package with the use of different materials, gaskets, thermoplastic elastomers, et cetera, to give you the environment you want for edibles, for flowers, for gummies, et cetera. A large billboard because we know more and more standards are coming in terms of labeling. E-commerce durability. There's a big neck on here. The fragile part, the closure, sits inside the package, as you can see by the lack of a silhouette. So you can drop it on its head, you can fill it with pills, you can put shampoo in it and ship it across the country, and it doesn't come open. And finally, regulated dispersal. So there's enough friction between the slider and the package that you can open the window just a little bit, which doesn't seem very important until you look at about 70 million people who have a very difficult time opening their pill bottles. Someone in here knows someone who loathes their pill bottles, and for good reason, they're difficult to use. But for somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 million people, they're very difficult, which is why we say that SnapSlide is convenient for all and life-changing for many. Because like our friend Josh, there really are a lot of people for whom this motion is very difficult. And we often say, how compliant can a patient be if they can't open the pill bottle? So a lot of stuff up there. The only things that are important are the idea that our patent estate allows us to offer brand differentiation amidst increasing regulations. The only thing to pay attention to is that we have more than 60 utility claims granted. We have spent 3 years working on our patent estate to make it as defensible and flexible as possible, because we have future-proof cannabis packaging to offer anybody who's interested in seeing packaging as a competitive advantage. So thanks very much.
Cool. Do I get to keep this one? Next up, one of the more interesting characters out there. Not sure if my favorite fun fact about you is all your Burning Man stuff that I see on Facebook, or if he's the lawyer going after the Saudi government for 9/11. The one and only Jerry Goldman from Anderson Kill.
Pretty good. We have a firm that we've been in this space since 2014. We do corporate work, we do transactional work, we do litigation, we do insurance coverage, we do IP work. We take care of people who invest in the space, we take care of people who raise money for the space, we take care of people who are engaged in the space, and we take care of people who assist in the space. What makes us different is that we care about our clients, we're creative, and we work real hard. And we're a little smart.
Thank you so much. A couple pieces of news, as you may have read. SAFE banking passed in the House. So that's a round of applause worthy thing, I'd say. Obviously, it still needs to pass the Senate. Who knows if it'll even make it to committee. But it's one of the most, probably the landmark bill on cannabis in Congress, especially considering that a lot of Congress hasn't been friendly, congressional sessions haven't been friendly to the issue over the past couple of years. And so now, hopefully, we're starting to see some headwinds. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The governors had a summit. That was New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut. I think Pennsylvania made an appearance as well. Liz is nodding. We'll talk about that. And that was very exciting because that was specifically about cannabis. And so it seems like the governor is very earnest about bringing this conversation up in 2020. The CBD ban took effect in terms of quote-unquote food additives. So you know, if we get hit with a fine for our partnership with Recess, then so be it, because the federal hemp guidelines supposedly might be coming out in a couple weeks. I mean, we'll see what actually happens there, but just read in Marijuana Moment that the Senate was suggesting, or at least alluding to, new guidelines coming out about hemp, and so maybe this ban might hopefully will only last like a month and a half. And then many have seen Elon Musk taking a hit on Joe Rogan. Apparently, NASA spent $5 million telling SpaceX not to consume cannabis. It's not really game-changing for the industry, but I thought it was funny. So now you know, $5 million went towards that. Good use of taxpayer dollars. So that's some of the news, but obviously we have the source of the news here with us, so let's have Josh stop talking and give her more time. MGO and LO, so they are CannaGather's accounting firm, MGO, and then LO is on the advisory side, whole suite of professional services. If you're interested on the accounting side or on the professional services side, speak with Ryan or some of the other folks from the team who are here from MGO and LO. Wilson Elser, law firm in the space. I just stopped myself from saying something that I will talk about next month, but they are working with us on a very exciting project and have been a great sponsor, full-service law firm. And they have an event coming up, an insurance, cannabis insurance event coming up on Friday. So if you're interested, definitely speak with them about that. PKF O'Connor Davies, my personal accountants. And so as you've seen from many of the sponsors that have been up so far, a lot of professional services, namely legal and accounting. For anyone that knows my experience over the past couple of years, getting really solid professional service providers is really, really important. So I'm really glad that we have some honorable and somewhat smart lawyers and accountants, and I would say that Jerry's being modest on behalf of all of them. They're industry leading, I would say. And so if you are going to start a company in this space, if you're part of a company in this space, really get top tier legal and accounting, because I guarantee you from multiple personal experiences, it will cause you problems if you do not. A couple of our other sponsors tonight, BDS Analytics. If you're interested in data, if you're interested in what's going on in the legal markets, Washington, Colorado, etc., BDS Analytics is a leader in POS data. So you can see what SKUs and what brands are selling, how the modalities, are people using vaping, are they using flower? BDS has all that data. Recess, as you saw and as mentioned, is one of the top, arguably the top CBD beverage on the market right now, and they're based here in New York State. So if you didn't see them, they're probably gone by high demand. I may or may not have had one, and by may or may not have, I had the blackberry chai. So definitely try to grab one. If not tonight, then on your way home. Great CBD drink. Hello Convo. We've been able to fortunately scale our Instagram presence quite a bit. We're at like 14,000, up from like 0. And Hello Convo helped us do that. Splash is our ticketing provider. BNB Bank. Apparently they bank cannabis businesses. Peter's here, and if you can find him, you too can get a bank account. How they do it, I have no idea. Genuinely, I actually need to talk to him. I want to talk to you. I can't see anyone really because it's all very dark, but BNB Bank now does cannabis banking. Trust Capital. So David is a leading venture capitalist here in the cannabis industry and based in New York. So if you're looking for help getting your business off the ground, or if you're looking for funding, Trust Capital. Herba Verde Group, cultivation operation in multiple states, North Carolina, I believe in New York and California. Just had a great summit. Thank you for that amazing event. For anyone who knows, it was pretty tremendous. So cultivators in the cannabis and hemp spaces. And for the host committee and for our VIPs, you'll get a bottle of CBD olive oil, courtesy of Jenny's Baked at Home. If you didn't yet, that's because they're over there, and I forgot to bring them to the other place, so they're literally right there. So yeah, come up to me after this, and we'll hook you up with some CBD olive oil, courtesy of Jenny's Baked at Home. Quick heads up, CannaGather calendar. We operate events, for those who don't know, in multiple cities. We're currently at around 6, maybe 7. We're in LA, we're in Orange County, Baltimore, DC, Denver, New Haven is coming back online, and we have our NOLA kickoff. So for anyone who knows people in New Orleans, definitely give them a heads up. That's on the 7th, I believe. Yeah, that's November 7th. If you go to CannaGather.com, you'll see all of the upcoming events from across the country. And as I said, we'll be talking about vaping next month on November 20th. So our No is with the Blink Group. I'm sure many of you know Blink Group, quite a presence here in New York. Blink Group they do vaping hardware and advisory for a lot of the brands and the retailers. But in particular, our No is probably the #1 expert on vaping in the world. He's the chairman of the ISO committee on vaping. He was part of the team that blocked Governor Cuomo's ban on flavored vapes. He's really smart about vaping, and there's probably no one better in the world to talk about it than him. So we're excited to welcome him next month, and you can get $5 off your tickets if you buy soon. So go to CannaGather.com, November 2019, and grab your tickets. We'll be back here then, and it'll be around my birthday. And so, yeah, it'll be sweet. So now that we got all that out of the way, reminder, most events you go to, most social functions you go to, you put your phone away, you be very polite. This is not exactly the opposite, but the polite thing to do in this case is to take out your phone, take some pictures, share it on social media. I hear TikTok is very popular nowadays. I'm a little too old for that, but if you have a TikTok account, share it there. Facebook, Twitter, tag us, do all the things at CannaGather, and then State Senator Liz Krueger. Thank you so much for coming out. We'd love to welcome you to the stage.
Can I sit?
I encourage you to sit. I mean, you.
Okay. Evening.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, it's dark out there. You have no idea how many people are there.
It's very intimate. So as I said to Senator Krueger, normally I don't prepare per se. I just sort of come up here and ask a couple of the same questions because I think that they're interesting. But, you know, well, first of all, thank you all for coming out. This is a very packed event. But we're all here because it's a very important topic. It's cannabis legalization. And there's no one better in New York State to talk to about this issue than you, Senator Krueger. You are the lead sponsor for the MRTA, but would love for you to introduce yourself to folks who are either not your constituents or don't know you as well, as I have followed you on Facebook and Twitter and at events for the past couple of years. So would love for you to introduce yourself.
Great. So hi, I'm Liz Krueger. I represent the east side of Manhattan from around Union Square Park up to 96, but I zigzag a little bit going west in the 50s. I am one of 63 state senators. We all have approximately the same population in our district. But if I was upstate New York, I might have 5 counties. And here I can walk my district probably quicker than I can drive my district, given congestion, in 2 hours. So I've been in the state Senate now. It'll be 18 years in January. I'm not going to give you a lot of history other than to say I never wanted to be a politician. I was drafted against my will. And then I got in, and I won't say I can't get out, because of course I can just decide not to run again. But once I got in, I realized that it was actually the right thing to do for me, and more importantly, my goals for New York State were what I believed were the right things for New York State. And that was first and foremost taking a Republican-controlled Senate and moving it into the Democratic category. And that took a hell of a long time. So we only took over in the majority in January of 2019 after the 2018 election cycle. And technically, if you've been counting, pretty much the Republican Party controlled the New York State Senate since 1939 with 2 one-year turnovers. But this is the first time there's actually been enough Democrats to assure a Democratic majority with the votes to get things done. And we're all fairly confident we are going to hold and grow in the 2020 elections. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's the right answer. Although you're welcome to be whatever party you like. Although apparently we're narrowing it down to only 2 in this country, and at the rate Donald Trump is going, there will only be 1 soon, because I don't.
Hopefully a certain one, and not the other one.
No, I have plenty of good, upstanding Republicans in my district. It was the last Republican district in Manhattan forever, and I keep talking to the Republicans in my district who are like, oh my God, what happened to our party? I go, exactly, do something. We should have at least a 2-party system, and you guys have like allowed crazy to take over the White House. But this is New York, where we have to go it alone on lots of things, not just legalizing marijuana. So I am the chair of the Finance Committee, which is an enormous amount of work and responsibility. And usually it's just by explaining to people, no, we don't have the money you want. And no, your taxes aren't too high, cope. This is the great state, And we have great public services and education and mass transit and environmental policy, and they all cost money, and that's what government does. We collect taxes so that we can provide the services that 20 million New Yorkers need. I did get involved in cannabis, getting to tonight's discussion, also sort of against my will about 5 years ago, when I was looking at data highlighting the rate of criminal justice intervention based on race involving marijuana. So you looked at the data and you knew a few things. One, people were using cannabis pretty much at the same level, whether they were black, white, Latinx, Asian, and yet when you looked at who was getting arrested, just black and Latino kids. And in my district, which is a disproportionately white district, if kids pull out marijuana cigarettes and smoke them on 79th and 5th Avenue, everybody goes, "Ah, the kids, they never listen to you." And if you were black or brown and you did the same thing on 125th Street and 5th Avenue, somebody came along and busted you, and you ended up with a criminal record. So the reason I got involved was the recognition by me that there was something fundamentally wrong and racist about how we were handling criminalization of marijuana. And the data and the research showed that had been true since we first created prohibition, and that it was a failed war on drugs experiment that just kept getting worse and worse as the world knew scientifically that cannabis was not a product that was causing harm, nor was it more addictive than many other things that we legalize and tax and regulate, and yet it was causing huge problems for young people. So I was talking to advocates who said, we need somebody willing to write a bill for legalizing marijuana. We know it won't pass right away, and we're not even sure we can get medical marijuana in New York, but we really hope you would consider this. And we think that you're the right one because you're perfectly prepared to come out and say what I will say right now. Yes, I used marijuana when I was a teenager, quite a bit. No, I stopped using marijuana when I was 19. It was 1976, and it was the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the original. Don't go to the second version. Go to the original. It's an amazing movie. So that I could very comfortably talk about the fact that, yes, I knew what it was like to use marijuana as a kid, but I had no interest in it now. I have no intention of going into the business, being an entrepreneur. If a doctor tells me it might be a good product for me at some point in life for some reason, I'll consider it. But I'm really very boring. I have no interest in taking mind-altering drugs. I also don't really drink alcohol. I'm really boring. In Albany, they joke that if you don't drink, you must be on the wagon. So they say, how long have you been on the wagon? I'm like, no, I'm saving that vice for later. I just don't really drink. So I sort of was, and again, I was old enough to be everybody's mother who was involved with the product. So they were like, oh, this is great. You can talk to white suburban soccer moms about this issue. You can talk comfortably about knowing that white kids have been using marijuana since long before you were a white kid yourself. I was comfortable talking about the differences and the issues in urban areas and rural areas and suburban areas. And so I set off to write this bill. And I knew that I wanted to have a partner in arms, so to speak, at the assembly side, who came out of a different community, preferably upstate. It would be great if it was an African American or Latino legislator. And I quickly came across Crystal Peoples-Stokes, an assemblywoman from Buffalo, who also came to the issue from pretty much the same place I did. she, seeing as an African-American legislator from that big city upstate New York, Buffalo, that the criminal justice imbalance was horrifying and doing real harm to the communities she was representing. So we set off to see if we could write this bill. And again, we had not yet gotten medical marijuana. But I knew one thing. If we introduced the bill to legalize marijuana, the governor would immediately say, okay, let's do medical marijuana. Because he would see, even though he had been outspoken against medical marijuana up until then, that he would see that if he didn't take some piece of the issue on, even crazier things would be proposed. And we introduced the bill. 3 days later, he announced his support for medical marijuana. So I was right about the strategy. I knew we would have to get medical marijuana first in New York State, and that it would be a longer-term educational process for legalized adult use recreational. But it's also true that other states in the country were ahead of us and were moving down the road. And so the bill's changed many times over the years. Perhaps I've talked to half of you in the audience. I can't see any of you, but I feel like my chief of staff and I, Brad Usher, have talked to half the world involved with cannabis in the state of New York, if not more. So the bill's been evolving, and we're getting closer and closer to getting it passed. And last year was a close, but not yet. And I think 2020 could be the year we get it done. Stop there.
Brad was definitely going to be on the VIP list, but he couldn't make
yeah.
it, unfortunately. So hi, Brad. Brad works with Senator Krueger, has been absolutely amazing and passionate about this issue. So if you see Brad, tell him thank you. So what happened in 2019? A lot of people were like, yeah, we're going to get that weed thing, and then we didn't. So tell us more.
So there's not one answer, but the governor said, I think I want to get this done, and we should try to get it done in the budget. And Crystal and I agreed with him. That is the place that both he has the most power to move things forward because of more complicated things in the state constitution about his power in the budget. But it's also true that the budget is this enormous document. It's actually about 9 to 11 separate bills, but the legislature is dealing with endless issues at the same time. So if you assume there are legislators who might be on the fence about their position on legalized marijuana or any other topic you have in that you're thinking about, to get an on-the-fence legislator to take a vote just straight up as a bill, they then have to answer the question, why did you vote for that bill or why did you vote against that bill? To their constituents, to the press, to whomever. If marijuana, for example, in this case cannabis, is rolled into a budget bill, then the question is, why did you vote for cannabis when you said you're on the fence or you're not sure about it? And an answer can be, well, it's true, I'm not sure I was that much a fan of cannabis, but the other 92 issues in that bill really required that I vote for that bill. And so you can, so to speak, give legislators cover when you put major policy legislation within budget bills. Now, in fairness, cannabis clearly is a revenue topic, so there actually are all kinds of budgetary impacts with revenue and expenditures with cannabis, and it touches on endless different state agency issues. It's agricultural policy, it's health policy, it's business policy, it's taxation, it's just, I think we counted up once, and I think Jamie's in the audience, but I think it was like 9 different state agencies that would have a role somehow in an adult recreational cannabis legalization. So there's actual reasons to justify having it dealt with within budget documents. And the governor was interested, so Crystal and I were, okay, we're going to try to sell this to our 2 conferences to get support and to move it through in the budget process. And there were multiple meetings and discussions, and they were what's called, it's Albany lingo, but 3-way discussions where the staff for the governor, the staff for the assembly, the staff for the Senate all sit in a room and hash out individual issues. And between what the governor rolled out in his CRTA versus my MRTA, you can't believe how many different issues there were to discuss and to debate and either to agree or to agree to disagree. So we were moving through a process where we actually in good faith thought we were going to get it in the budget and get it done that way. And then, although I've been told, no, the legislature stepped away, I keep assuring people the legislature did not step away. Crystal and I did not walk away from the efforts within the budget. The governor stepped away from the process in the budget. Why, I'm not totally sure. But suddenly there were no more 3-way discussions, and there was storylines coming out in the press that the 2 leaders of the Assembly and the Senate had said, no, we're not letting that happen. But I know for a fact that wasn't the case. So it didn't get in the budget. Then we thought, well, there's still another shot to try to do it as freestanding legislation, which involves the 2 houses passing the bill and the governor signing it. It was very clear. There was no point in even trying to get the 2 houses to pass the bill unless the governor said he wanted it and he wasn't going to veto it. Because you certainly weren't going to get legislators who might still be feeling this was a controversial issue to do a freestanding vote on. Nobody was going to take that vote if they believed the governor was going to veto and it was going to be a meaningless vote. So if you're a legislator and you have your district telling you we're not sure we love this, if you have to go home and explain you voted for it anyway, you certainly aren't going to do that if you're not going to get a bill passed at the end because the governor is going to veto the bill. So for after the budget, for quite a while, the governor did not signal his interest in coming back to the table and trying one more time. So Crystal and I started to try to build the momentum, at least just to keep it alive and to discuss with our colleagues what they thought they needed to have changed in the bill for them to be comfortable enough to vote for it as a freestanding bill. And we were getting lots of different messages from lots of our colleagues, but we were getting closer and closer to feeling like we could get the votes. If the governor was interested, we could get the votes. But he wasn't coming to the table, which was still a problem. And then literally, with about 3 days left in session, suddenly the governor was interested again. You were up there all the time, Josh, right? And it was like, oh, can we do it in 3 days? I don't know. Because it requires getting the deals set and sign off, and you had suddenly every legislator in both houses going, well, I thought I was a yes, but I really need you to make sure this is in there. I really need you to make sure this is not in there. I really need you to make sure that there's the commitment over here. So we were literally just meeting with legislators nonstop, trying to collect up the, okay, do we think if we can get this in, we have the votes? And literally we ran out of time. We were on a schedule of when the legislature was closing down, and we ran out of time. So in those same 3 days, I had colleagues who said, okay, we wanted to do the whole thing together, and there's all these reasons to do it together. And together, I mean, the criminal justice reforms, the tax and regulate of recreational changes, expansion and improvements in the medical marijuana program, and also regulation and standards for the hemp CBD world. Those were the 4 major pieces of the legislation. So I had colleagues saying, could we just get the hemp CBD part done? Okay, let's try. So there was a freestanding bill. We ran around saying, how about this? The governor's people said we need to make some changes. We quickly said, we'll make the changes. But there was only 3 days, there wasn't 3 days left, which meant under the state constitution, if a bill hasn't aged for 3 days, you need the governor to give you what's called a message of necessity to pass a bill that's newer than 3 days old. he wouldn't give us the message of necessity. And we're like, no, we made the changes you said you need. This is just the CBD hemp section of the law. But no. So then my colleagues who were focused heavily on the criminal justice side, not that I'm not, but the chair of the Codes Committee said, could we at least get some of the decrim work done and expungement done? Because we finally figured out how we could get an expungement law in New York State. We never had one before. So we're like, okay. So we broke that off. And to some degree, the same issue where the governor's not doing messages of necessity and we don't have 3 days of aging left. But there we negotiated more info than you want, a chapter amendment, and we stuck it in the final bill he was giving us. So in the final bill of the governor for the year, which was technically the capital budget bill we had never done 3 months earlier, you don't care. There's a whole section on decriminalizing marijuana to deal with the governor's concerns. And we thought we could also perhaps get some of the medical marijuana expansion done. But the governor said absolutely not. So then we went home because we were technically done with session. And now it's October, and Crystal and I have been busy redrafting a new version of the bill based on our understanding of where we all had handshake deals at the end of session, but we had never codified it into a document. And suddenly I'm much more optimistic that the governor might be interested in taking a stab at this yet again in the budget coming up in January. And the reason I'm much more optimistic is twofold. One, the quote-unquote crisis in vaping, and two, his interest in doing a regional approach with multiple governors, as you just said, where there was a summit with Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island last Friday. And serious discussion with the governors of all these states. The regulators from Oregon were there. Some other people who are experts from around the country were there. And a sincere interest, I think, on behalf of all these governors, that it's time that we did something, and it made sense for the region of these states to go down the path together, even if they weren't going to end up with identical programs.
Yeah, and that was Senator Myrie and Senator Bailey on decrim? Was it the two of them? Or?
It was Senator Bailey's bill.
Senator Bailey. So shout out Senator Bailey.
Yes.
We were on a panel with him last week. And
yes.
so, yeah, you can't expunge if there's no expungement framework. And so the whole idea of expungement in New York State didn't exist until this bill passed, which is sort of the cornerstone of a lot of the criminal justice reform conversations that were going on. But in particular, you say that, you ran out of time. But a lot of the headlines that I saw were, this was the reason, that was the reason that it didn't happen. And as you said, I was there, so I know that it wasn't true. But in particular, MRTA, you've been doing this for years. Is it 5 years?
5 years
7?
now.
5 years. 5 years. So you've been doing MRTA. So basically every year it sort of goes from the previous year to the next year. And that was what was called the A print. So the A print that's the first version. And then the B print that was produced really delineated a lot of the appropriations for things like social equity, police training, substance abuse education, youth education. And so if you go and you look it up online, you'll see that there's this B print, which is about 10 pages, I want to say, maybe a dozen pages, maybe 15, in addition to the 100 pages of the existing MRTA A print. But then there was a C print that, for some reason, no media outlets talked about.
Well, in fairness, we never introduced it into the computer system.
Which was because it was never introduced into the computer system.
A bill is not technically a bill until it shows up in the computer system.
And so the C print had certain changes to speak to some of the concerns around some of the folks who were like, I don't know, maybe I want this, I want that. And had the C print come out, the conversation we would be having may be very different about whether we have cannabis in New York State already. And so,
well, okay.
I've never seen the C print. No one's seen the C print because it never went through the process. So if you're able to share, I'd be curious, and I think many in the audience would be curious, what were some of those changes in the C-print that we may see going into 2020?
Okay. So again, as we said, there were members from different parts of the state saying, I think you could get my vote if. So the C-print just became almost like a laundry list of other things we needed to deal with. But so I'll talk about one that is of real concern, not only to many of my colleagues, particularly from outside the big cities where everyone drives, but also clearly a big concern of all the governors when I was at the summit the other day. The ability to evaluate whether when someone is driving and they have been using cannabis products, whether they are, quote unquote, under the influence and at risk as a driver. So we all know about sobriety and the blood and the urine and the breathalyzer tests for alcohol. And what we constantly get hit up with is, but there's no equivalent for cannabis. And real concern, again, primarily in the areas of each state where people drive to get everywhere. I represent Manhattan. You don't drive if you need to get anywhere quickly. So using cannabis and driving isn't such a big deal. But everywhere else that doesn't have mass transit, that's how everybody gets around. So real concern that how would a police officer, if they stopped you, and again, the same as alcohol, first they observe that they believe you are driving under the influence of something. But then when they stop you, how do they test that? And then if they test that, how would they use the evidence, if there is such, as a basis if they were bringing a charge against you for driving while inebriated? And the fact is that up until now, we have lots of pilots going on all over this country and Canada for models that might work. There's not really one standard that's used. There's not even a way that people go, well, if it's a number, what's the number? It's like, I don't know what the number would be because I don't even know what the test that they might be using is. So the police say a blood test is not a good model, and I agree, because you're not going to schlep everybody into an ER and ask for a blood test to be given. And then, of course, it can be many hours in between when you stop the person versus when you get a blood test done or result. I actually was just talking to somebody here in this audience now who has yet a different system, that sort of a breathalyzer / can absorb through the skin the mix in your body. We know that THC, unlike alcohol, can stay in your system for weeks, if not months, as opposed to alcohol in your blood having a very short lifespan, so that when you see alcohol of X in your blood, you know it's there now. So there's real concern, and so far no perfect answer of some standardized test that would stand up in a court if the police were bringing charges. And that's a real issue. It's a real issue that I think all of us are going to need to confront as regulators. And certainly the governors seem very focused on that, and quite a few of my colleagues. Now, there also was a commitment in version C379, I don't know, exaggerating, that there would be a certain amount of money made available to do improved training of police officers and how to evaluate driving while impaired. There's a fairly expensive, like 1-month training, and there's apparently a much less expensive fast-track 2-day training. And I'm forgetting the names of each of those right now. So real interest and commitment to having money available to train police with one of the or both of those models. There was real concern about, which was always my concern also, about not just keeping it away from children, but not allowing any kind of marketing of cannabis products to children. This is a product that would only be used legally over age 21 in New York State. And so it's amazing how it was a good part of the summit the other day discussing no gummy bears. Absolutely no fruit-flavored or candy-like gummy bears. And some discussion from some of the governors about why do we even have edibles. And I was like, well, it's one thing to say no gummy bears, but the fact is you can either sell cannabis in a chocolate brownie or a chocolate cookie, or everybody's going home and baking them themselves. So I'm not sure that...
Or they're going to get it off the illicit market like they do now.
Right, exactly. Importance of packaging, importance of testing from seed to sale. Heavy focus and discussion, both for CBD products and other hemp products, as well as cannabis THC products, that there is standardized lab testing of every product, that there is an assurance that they are not mixed with other more dangerous products, or products, as we're learning, that were never intended to be used in certain ways, i.e. inhaling vitamin E through a vaping product, because it turns out vitamin E, if you swallow it, might be a nice healthy vitamin, but if you vape it, it becomes a oil on the inside of your lungs that's toxic, and you literally drown from it. There's real concern about making sure that products are what they are. Right now, many of you probably are working in the CBD field, but you might have seen that recent analysis. Most of the products don't actually have what they say they have in it, and that is a real concern for many of my colleagues, for me, for the governors, and that's why it's so important, actually, that we come up with a regulatory structure for CBD and hemp products as well as cannabis products. What else? There's still a fight over where does the revenue go to? What is it being used for? And Crystal and I and many of our colleagues feel very strongly that the revenue from cannabis needs to be reinvested in the communities where the harm was done through prohibition for so many years. We need to ensure that it is small businesses and entrepreneurs from every community who have opportunities to get licensed to work in these businesses. There needs to be an assurance of a commitment to certain portions of the money going for drug treatment for more serious substance abuse issues, as well as public education campaigns about the dangers of drugs and why perhaps you shouldn't be using any of these drugs. There's still disagreement about home grow. And many of the states that have legalized don't allow home grow. And yet many of the advocates that I know...
This is adult use home grow.
Adult use home grow.
But medical would be separate.
We don't have medical home grow in this state now.
I'm saying the disagreement is...
About adult use recreational home grow. So I don't think there's too many people pushing for medical home grow, because how would you know you're getting the product that your doctor actually thinks you should be getting?
I don't know. I'm just looking at legislation from different states.
Okay.
I'm not experimenting at home in my little botany experiment.
Right. But I have legislative colleagues who say I can live with anything but home grow. I cannot have it growing in the backyard, and I can't have it growing inside people's apartments. And there are risks, actually, if it's growing inside of people's apartments. And yet, at the same time, who's kidding who? That's how everybody's been getting their cannabis for centuries. They grow it themselves. And I have no illusions that we come up with a regulated legal market and all forms of illegal cannabis disappear from the face of the earth. I don't think so. But Oregon reports after 7 years of a legalized system that they believe they've knocked out 80% of their black market cannabis. And so that also ties into how are you pricing it? And if you put too many taxes and costs on a product, people are just going to keep buying the black market product in the alleyway behind the dispensary because the stuff in the dispensary is too expensive. So that's also a balance that needs to be hit correctly and adjusted for. And quite a few states have adjusted down the pricing when they go into a legalized market and realize we're not getting rid of the illegal market this way. So there's lots and lots of lessons. That I think one of the good things about New York being not one of the first guys out of the gate is we get to see what's worked and what hasn't worked in other states. And we've been attempting to factor those realizations into the ultimate legislation that I do hope we get this year.
Cool. Hopefully.
Thank you.
So if you didn't like synthesize all of that, that was a lot in a good way. So we have this video, and I want to underscore this is, if you were to talk to me in February and be like, we need to really focus on like advocacy and education and what's going on in Albany and policy legislation and all of that stuff, I would have told you, yes, sure, let's do it, great. But after going up to Albany and spending much more time there and having these conversations, like, we really have to do it. Like, show of hands, who either cares about cannabis from a policy standpoint or wants to get into the industry? Or both. Yeah, like if you actually care, you really need to understand, not everything she said, because there's a lot, but like pretty much everything that she just said. And I say that, I'm not kidding. I mean, I know I'm very funny, but like, finally, people laugh, but not when I want them to. No, but you can laugh. No, you can laugh. No, but seriously, this is incredibly, incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of the narratives that are out there, either from media or on social media or whatever, are about some valid alternate narratives that are relevant and important, but not the key things. So in particular, driving. You would think it's sort of silly. Why? Because I both don't drive or consume cannabis, and as a member of your constituent, we're probably, substances aside, the worst drivers in the country, people from the Upper East Side. Most of us don't have our license. It took me 4 times to get my license. I kid you not. Haven't driven in 10 years. But driving is a very important topic. It's 3 votes and maybe a 4th vote in the Senate. And you could argue that we were 1 vote shy, we were 3 votes shy, we were 2 votes shy. But if we got those 3 votes, we have legal cannabis. And why? Because of driving. And so on the one hand, some might argue, well, people are already consuming cannabis and they're already driving, so it's a ridiculous topic. And in some sense, they're right. The police should be handling this. But on the other hand, if we're looking at this from a harm reduction standpoint, we don't want people consuming and being impaired and getting into an accident, and even one person getting an accident is too many. But we can't say, a legislator can't say, a state senator who's voting against this can't say that I'm not supporting it because of driving because we don't have a breathalyzer test. Colorado has legal cannabis, they don't have a breathalyzer, and they're doing just fine. In fact, 78.8% of DUIs are what are called monodrug alcohol. Monodrug cannabis is about 5%, and if you throw in polydrug alcohol cannabis, you're talking 20% aggregate combined. So it's 20%. And when I'm on the phone for an hour with the Colorado DA's office, they're not talking to me about, oh my God, we have an outbreak of people smoking weed and driving. That's not really their concern, because you want to know how they do it? They have funding for DREs, and if they have to bring them in, they bring them in for a blood test, and they test them for delta-9 THC or 11-hydroxy-THC if they had an edible, delta-9 if they smoked. And they have some measure that they use that's not exactly perfect correlation with impairment, which is ultimately the problem. It's not really about how much you consume, it's whether you're impaired. And 75% of those cases, there's a guilty conviction, and they get along their day. And it's fine, and it's not their problem. It's a problem, but it's a solved problem. And when everyone in this room is educated about how the other states are doing it, and they're doing it successfully, legislators can't come up with this excuse of, oh, we're concerned about driving, out of nowhere. And I know that Liz needs to be more political than I do, but everyone in this room should know what's going on. And these are the issues that legislators are saying why they're not supporting the bill. And I don't fault them because it's a complicated issue. But if you do the research, and especially if the research is given to you, it shouldn't be an issue anymore. So I'm excited to hear what are some of the things that you think are going to make it into the 2020 legislation, to speak to some of those people, either from CRTA or MRTA or the C-Print. What can we expect from 2020?
So I do think we need to get our arms around, even in the absence of one specific standardized test, how we're going to evaluate it. Because you're right on the facts.
It's not perfect. It's not
No,
perfect, but we need to standardize.
And I actually have never figured this out, but since the day I got to Albany almost 18 years ago, I watched as my colleagues passed 20, 30 DWI bills a year. And I was on the Alcohol Substance Abuse Committee very briefly early on. And finally, I said to the chair, you guys are doing 20, 30 bills a year. Can't you just come up with one bill that gets it right? I don't understand. Because we never get to talking about treatment. We're only talking about DWI bills in this committee. Why don't we break it into committees? A DWI committee, and you guys can talk about this forever, and a substance abuse treatment committee, and I'll go to that committee. But there does seem to be, in politics, this overwhelming concern with, can we come up with the perfect way to protect everyone from inebriated drivers now, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And it's also true that the district attorneys say, well, people are using all kinds of drugs, and we would like you to expand what you're doing for cannabis testing to all kinds of drugs, and get this done at the same time. And my answer is, this is a bill about cannabis. If you want to change other drug laws in the state of New York, which could increase criminality, talk to some other legislator. That's not on the agenda for cannabis within this bill. I think something else, based on the discussion of the governors the other day, and you said you're going to have a vaping expert next week, people are freaked out, sincerely and legitimately freaked out at the rate of vaping by teenagers. The statistic that was used at the summit was that between 2000 and 2017, we reduced teenage smoking of tobacco by 82%. In 1 year alone, the rate of vaping, probably tobacco, by teenagers went up 78%. So when you say PTA moms are calling their legislators hysterical, it's true. They are, because these are parents watching their kids using vaping. And again, the vast majority of it is candy-flavored tobacco-type products. But there is a model that's clearly grooming children into heavy use of tobacco through vaping products. And I, for one, would love to just outlaw tobacco. I know Brad tells me, my chief of staff, you can't say that. You're out here saying prohibition doesn't work. Except, sorry, everybody who's in the business of tobacco, you're really good at selling stuff. Find something that doesn't kill us to sell us, okay?
I never heard you say that. That's awesome. I mean, longer conversation, but
no, I once had tobacco
we're going to have you back next month.
come in to meet with me, and they said, we're here to answer questions. I said, about what? They said, about any questions you have about tobacco. I said, why do you kill people for a living? They didn't say anything back. I said, no, I'm serious. You're really good at your jobs. I was a smoker. You can convince people to smoke a substance that they know is going to be addictive and they know will ultimately probably kill them. So it just seems to me you could come up with something that didn't kill us to get our money. And one of them quietly said, chewing tobacco? I was like, nah, that kills you too, just in a different way. I said, what else? They said, no, that's all. I go, so you flew up from like North Carolina just to have me ask you why you're killing us? Seems like a bad use of your day, but have a nice life. But really, get out of the tobacco business in whatever form people are using it in, because it's a lose-lose storyline. But right now, it's a lose-lose storyline that's also impacting legislators and governors' opinions about how well they can cope with legalizing cannabis, even though you can show them in many different ways that it is not only a far, far less dangerous product when used as a recreational product, but it also can have health value when used in other ways. So oddly, we're up in this competition where we have to deal with the concerns and problems of vaping and the tobacco industry being an overlapping set of discussions with marijuana.
So we're running a little short on time. Is everyone cool if we stay a little bit longer? Is that cool? Okay, cool. So I definitely don't want to, I showed you a list of like 15 questions, and unsurprisingly we're at like not 15 questions. I obviously want to ask the question about social equity. You mentioned it. This was sort of one of the sort of alternate narratives that got weaved into why it didn't happen. It seems clear to me from what I've heard and from what I experienced that wasn't why, but it is nonetheless a very important topic of, if we're going to do this, if we're going to do legalization, it needs to be done right. It needs to repair the damage from the failed war on drugs. How are you, how is CPS, how is MRTA, CRTA, how is it thinking about reinvestment into those communities and the license process and all those things?
So I think Crystal and I are still pretty much in the same place in the model that we've had. A whole series of different kinds of licenses and size of licenses with a priority for communities of color and for small farmers in upstate New York for agricultural purposes, and a distribution formula of revenue, again, for drug treatment, reinvestment in technical assistance and capitalization of small businesses, education around drug issues, and then other revenues, which will grow over years. They just also magically happen in the first couple of years for other priorities. I'd say the disagreement we were having with the governor is not on the social equity side of it. It's very simple, and I don't think it would matter what the topic is or who the governor is. Executives think they should get all the money and decide where it goes. And they're not really very interested in the legislature or anyone else having a say. And so I sort of get that. I mean, I guess if I was the governor, I would want that power too. But mayors, governors, and presidents always think they're the executives and they know what the priority for the money ought to be. So, for example, during last year's discussions, one of the other big hot topics in Albany was congestion pricing in the MTA. We're all New York City folks, so we know what that means. And a real concern about how they were going to get enough money out of congestion pricing to get it off the ground and to float bonds. And so suddenly one day the governor was, oh, we'll use the marijuana money for the MTA bonds. I was like, nah, that wasn't really in my plan, even though I know how important the MTA is. So I was like, well, what kind of money are you talking about? Well, we need $1 billion by December. I go, if we passed a bill today, you're not getting $1 billion in revenue out of marijuana, so that's not going to work for you. And I was like, oh, that's right, we need it by December. nope, never mind, marijuana is not for the MTA this year. But again, I'm not trying to disrespect it. I'm actually highlighting the crises that executives find themselves in when they need to come up with money for priorities. And so they hate having any kind of revenue stream in a lockbox for any specific purposes. But if you're talking about having money to reinvest from a social equity perspective and all the things that we need it for, then you basically need to have some model of lockbox. And so I think that continues to be a real struggle between the legislature and the executive, not so different than the struggle we have on almost every other budgetary fight.
And one last question before I open it up, sort of two-part question. So you told us what happened in the C-print at a high level and some of the issues surrounding the end of session. So what happened, what has happened? I know, I mean, I took a break and it wasn't even my job, but like it was so exhausting, like after session. So what happened after session, after you took a bit of a break till now? And then what can the people in this audience do to try to help you in 2020?
So the legislature, at least for me, doesn't take breaks.
Okay.
So
well, I don't know
because
you know,
as I said, 2019 was a revolutionary year in the New York State Senate for passing major legislation, and we actually passed 1,500 separate bills, 950 which were passed in both houses. And we're still fighting out what ones we can get signed by the governor versus vetoed. So it was a very active year on really a lot of major issues.
Thank you.
So again, cannabis is just one. So it's not what I wake up in the morning doing all the time or the thing I go to bed at night with all the time. But we in fact have continued to have meetings with many, many different players in different spaces of cannabis. We have continued to discuss with our partner, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, other things we think we should be trying to address within the bill. We have been having meetings with DAs from different parts of the state to get a better understanding of what their real concerns are, because they definitely fall in the category of a universe of people who are not so excited about all this. Some more so, some less so, but not so excited
Except for DA Vance?
Yes. And look, the New York City DAs have been much more open to the decriminalization side of the issue. But even they, if you look at it, are still moving quite a few cases. It's just not as low level on marijuana. We have continued to have discussions about, including you and I were on a panel in Harlem the other night with several of my colleagues who want to make sure that when we move to a model of legal recreational, that basically some of the same guys who are out there now selling illegal in the alleys can actually become legal entrepreneurs and don't get locked out, but rather have opportunities to become legal, legitimate business people. And there are lots of different models that have and haven't been working around the country. It looks like right now, even though it's very new, that the state of Illinois may have a better model for social equity. Massachusetts talks about it, but admits it isn't able to do it. California is very confused about, no, I mean they are, because they sort of have, you know, one of the largest, oldest markets, and they legalized, but they never quite figured out how to regulate or license. So now they have all these stores, except they're not licensed or regulated. So it's a little confusing, right?
Well, it's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad, but
Right.
it's also like, I mean, I have so many stories.
Right, so California's confusing. You know, Michigan is doing very well with some of their proposals. Nevada is the model I would least like to ever be like, because Nevada basically said, here are 5 big companies, you can make all the money, you can do whatever you want, we'll leave you alone, you run things. That's just what New York State does not want to do. So, again, lessons to be learned from various places. And then I guess one of the questions probably we're not going to get to because I have to leave even if you all don't, is, well, what happens with Washington? So I'm pretty sure we will get that banking bill passed the Senate sooner than later. Definitely when we become a Democratic Senate, which according to today we will. But I think even before, because you have a bunch of Republicans in the Senate.
Cory Gardner.
I know, who
Cory
are
Gardner.
like gung-ho. And that will really help immensely. But then I was asked also, well, do you think it might come off of Schedule A? And I don't think so at this point. I don't think our Congress at this moment in history is even contemplating a serious discussion of that.
Congressman Nadler is joining us to talk about the MORE Act in December, so I guess we'll find out then.
And even Congressman Nadler has higher priorities than cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
the
what's more important than cannabis. Does anyone know? Is there anything that could be more important for Congressman Nadler than cannabis right now?
Yes, there's endless issues.
No jokes aside, that
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Oh, impeachment. Oh,
Yeah.
he's doing the impeachment thing.
Yes.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So there's endless issues. So, but then somebody said to me the other day, let's not forget, once cannabis is removed from Schedule A, it's not that exciting. It's just another farm product that's really easy to grow. And it really put it in perspective for me of thinking about this whole new entrepreneurial world that you're all interested in or already involved in, and that everything could radically shift and be much less interesting for you, actually, if it's just another farm product. Because I don't know if there's a carrot gathering group or a rutabaga gathering
So in
group.
all seriousness, we've talked about
Me
CannaGather.
too.
In all seriousness, Senator Krueger, I have you beat on the boring, because I don't really drink alcohol, except for sometimes frozen margaritas. They're flavored. But I'm also a vegetarian.
Ah.
And so I was thinking, what if there were a group, it was going to be called Veggie Business, that was CannaGather, but for vegetables.
There you go.
Seriously, this is something that I thought about. So maybe you're right, but I get excited about farm products. So it's 9:08. I don't know if we have time for Q&A. You're already past the time.
I
You came
know.
early.
I'll give you 10 more minutes.
You came early. You're staying late. First of all, round of applause for State Senator Liz Krueger. Oh, also, what can we do? How can we help?
Particularly if you know that your legislator is on the fence about this issue, you can try to find out from their staff what are their concerns and see if you can help get them information that would help address their concerns. Now, how do you find out where your legislator is? You can just call and ask them. Has Senator so-and-so, Assembly Member so-and-so taken an official position on the Krueger People-Stokes legislation? And very often they'll say they're still thinking about it. So then if you can try to get a better understanding of what the concerns they have are, you can actually help be an educator and reach out, probably through this group and others, the Start Smart campaign.
Of which we're a part.
Okay, to help get them the information that they might need to resolve their concerns. You can just talk to other people about weighing in. It's fascinating how when you're a senator and an assembly member, you really do keep track of how many of your constituents take a strong position on something one way or the other. It's not like if you're president of the United States and there are 300 million people who might be weighing in or not. But if I get enough handwritten letters from people who live in my district about a specific issue, even if I wasn't focusing on it, suddenly I'm like, what's this issue that people are so concerned about in my district? So reaching out to your own, if you're living in a district where you don't know that your legislator is totally on board already, reaching out through friends to other districts. It's not that you can only reach out to your own, although you sort of count more in the district that you live and vote in. I always explain to teenagers who tell me there's no point in participating or voting. And I always say, well, here's the deal. If you tell me you have no interest in voting, I don't have to give a damn what you think. I like my job, but you can't take me out of it unless you're going to get involved. So if you tell me you're going to run against me, I'm going to pay a lot of attention. If you're going to tell me you like what I'm doing and you vote for me, I'm going to pay some attention. But if you tell me I can't be bothered and no, my vote doesn't count, and really what's the point of voting anyway, I'll tell you, as far as I'm concerned, you can drop dead. Because you don't affect, no, you have to get teenagers' attention. I don't really mean I think they should drop dead. But it does make them go, ooh, what did she say?
It's a metaphor.
Thank you.
It's a metaphor. I know I'm a very
gets
literal person. I know it's called CannaGather because it's about cannabis and we gather, but
no, if you want to get a rise from a group of teenagers, that's how you do it. You tell them, I don't have to give a damn about you. And it makes them actually stop and think, oh, wait, I want her to give a damn about me. So it's the same thing whether you're 17 or 70 as far as elected officials are concerned. So there are all kinds of ways to weigh in. You could ask them to hold a town hall. I've been going to quite a few lately. The one that we did together up in Harlem in a church was a very positive, I think, response. There were a few people who were against the issue, but I did one with John Liu in his district not too long ago, and they were really hostile. He asked me to come because he goes, I told them I was supporting your bill, and they are really mad at me. So I said, I'll get people who know more than me to come. So he said, will you come? They're going to yell at you. I'm like, that's okay. I've been yelled at by people before. So ask for town hall meetings so that you can have discussions in your community. I don't know. I keep getting invited to go to other states and use cannabis. I'm always like, no, thank you. So I'm not sure urging your legislators to use it is probably the best approach. And it is technically illegal.
Please do not send your legislators cannabis.
Oh my God, do not send us cannabis. No, no, no.
Although I have a funny story for you about a joke that was made by a legislator about another, I'll tell you.
Okay, fine.
Offline. But don't don't bring cannabis. Smoke-ins are not productive, although you mentioned 79th and 5th before. That's where Mayor Bloomberg lives, so that could be fun. But anyway, no smoke-ins. No smoke-ins.
And also, frankly, even if, look, a lot of people who are involved in the industry and who are interested in it are users of marijuana. Don't go visit anybody when you're high. It's useless to have a conversation with you when you're high. Let's be honest, okay? That is not the time to have a serious policy discussion. So if you choose to partake in cannabis for recreational purposes, I'm not telling on you, and I'm fine with it, but I don't want to have a meeting with you when you're high. And none of my colleagues do either.
I mean, before we go to Q&A, just one last question. I mean, would you say that when we're talking about cannabis, I feel like one of the piece of feedback from a senator, I'll tell you which one later, it doesn't really matter, is when you said it's politically a little volatile, you didn't say volatile, it's a little challenging, it's a little controversial. They wanted wins, right? They wanted to go back to their constituents and say, I did the right thing for you, that I helped you. Instead of, oh, I voted for this thing because, I felt like it. And so now you have these PTAs and other groups that, are genuinely concerned. But we didn't talk about some of the concerns around the unregulated market and talking about vaping. Right. What is the message to those people who are saying, oh, we don't want cannabis because it's dangerous? I mean, 0 people have died ever. I'm talking about tobacco, so many people have died. So what do we say to those people who are concerned about the dangers of cannabis when we're operating right now in the largest illicit market in the world?
And that's a very good beginning point that I start at usually when talking to my colleagues when they say, but there will be cannabis. I go, no. This is already the largest market in the world for cannabis. There are people driving under the influence now. There are people using it in every town, village, community now. The question is, are they using a safe product, or are they using a product that may be mixed or corrupted with other things that they shouldn't be using? So that, are you concerned about health and safety? You should want a regulated system. Do you want to see new business opportunities and new jobs? You know, it's interesting. There are some things people call economic development, where you can actually prove it's not really economic development, because there are no new jobs that are created. I'm a strange mix of people. I'm really opposed to government-sponsored gambling. I know people gamble; they always gambled, but gambling, there's not economic development. There's the winner, the people who own the gambling, and then everybody else, the losers. And you create very few jobs. And as we go to, by the way, online gambling and on your phone gambling, there are no jobs unless you're a programmer. So for me, that's not economic development. The number of people right here in this audience who are working on something related to cannabis, and then all the people who potentially are working for you and the companies you create, those are real jobs for real people. Those are even brick and mortar jobs in neighborhoods and communities, and then tax-paying people with these jobs. So this you can talk about as real economic development, a decrease in the criminal element, right? I don't want my kids or anyone else's kids buying product behind a store from somebody who's affiliated with the cartels, right? Nobody wants that. So let's bring it out of the shadows and recognize that you're then actually decreasing criminal activity. Not to mention how much money the state of New York will save in criminal justice as we are changing our laws. The estimates are that the state of New York, state and local combined, between police activity, the court process, lawyers sorry if you're a criminal defense lawyer and you might lose some clients, you can find other ones, not to worry, but it's up to $500 million a year just processing a victimless crime. Let's just get rid of it. That's $500 million more we have for investing in real things that are needed. So there are lots of really good reasons to want to have a legalized, above-board, regulated system. And so I think you can absolutely talk to legislators about those being the wins, not just because then I can get high and not have to worry about it, or I can make some money off of somebody else getting high. There are real advantages to having a legalized model, which is documented in other states. Something else that wakes up some people who think they have concerns, and you have to be a little careful because there's early evidence but no, fabulous, perfect FDA test. It appears that in states that have both medical marijuana and legalized recreational, they're seeing huge drops in opioid use. Yeah. And
we didn't even talk about that all night. I forgot about that one.
Huge drops in opioid overdoses. We have psychiatrists who are substance abuse specialists here at New York City hospitals, almost all of whom are in my district, actually. All the hospitals I represent Bedpan Alley on the east side of Manhattan. And they tell me how their patients may not be getting medical marijuana because they might not fall into a category of eligibility for medical marijuana because they actually are substance abusers. And then they decide they're going to switch to using marijuana, and that they lose interest in the more dangerous drugs. And so the doctors say, it's not legal, so I'm not sure exactly what to say to you, and I don't think I can quite find a category to write a prescription for you, but you know what? If whatever you're buying behind the building is preventing you from feeling like you need to take a more dangerous drug, keep going. So people are self-medicating with recreational marijuana with real significant wins for themselves. And even the states that have legalized, Oregon makes a big deal about this. that use by under 21-year-olds goes down when you legalize marijuana. I have parents say all the time, how can that be true? I go, I'll show you the data. And they go, why would that be true? I go, it's not cool anymore when it's legal. Teenagers don't want to do what mom and dad are doing. In fact, they live to not do what mom and dad are doing. Don't you remember being a teenager, right? It's all about rebellion. So if suddenly marijuana is just another thing that goes on in the world, it's not so interesting for you as a teenager. So Oregon has shown that their teenage use of marijuana has gone down over the 7 years, and their educational levels and improvements in scores for their high school students has gone up. So the fear that everybody in high school would sit around just getting high all day and not study, well, some of them were getting high all day, but it didn't matter whether it was legal or not. But making it legal didn't increase the chances that you weren't focused on school, just the opposite. So there's lots and lots of pluses here.
Couldn't agree more. And Oregon's not alone, by the way. Washington State, graduation rates go up. Colorado, 18 under. Youth consumption.
I meant Colorado when I said Oregon. I apologize.
I mean, it's probably all of them.
Yeah.
If you look at the states, you just look at the data, it's good, which is kind of surprising, honestly. When I was looking at the data, I was expecting it might be like, you know, sort of mixed, and I'd need to build a case, or I need to change my position on cannabis.
Yep.
But the data's good. So I've definitely monopolized all the Q&A time. I'm really sorry. If you have a question for Senator Krueger, I will personally make sure that it is answered. And if not, then I don't know, we'll figure it out.
So my website is lizkrueger.com, and you can send me email, liz@lizkrueger.com. I probably won't read it, but someone in my office will, and we do try to get back to everybody. Okay? So that's probably the best way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Champion of the MRTA, State Senator Liz Krueger. Thank you so much. Thank you.